Hello, hello, hello. This is Dayal Garunga, and I'm coming at you from a place of self. Thank you so much for being here. One of your favorite IFS podcasts, where we get to explore our inner space and our inner world and just take a deep breath with me, give a little bit of space because life is so busy sometimes, ain't it? And we don't give ourselves enough time or space to just connect with the parts in me that are often running my life on autopilot. I don't often allow myself to recognize that when I'm making decisions, when I'm responding to a situation, when I'm communicating or saying something to another person, that may or may not be coming from my core authentic sense of self. Oftentimes, it's coming from managerial or protective or younger, wounded, vulnerable parts of me that are managing and running my life for me. And those parts of us have very valuable roles to play. We don't get rid of them and tell them just to shut off and go away, but we want to do it intentionally from a place of self-relationship, where those parts exist as part of my system that I engage for specific purposes or meanings at the appropriate time, and then invite to soften back when they're no longer needed, rather than those parts being on overdrive all the time and all of the parts of me being on full throttle at every moment, creating the cacophony that is often my inner world. It was Bob Falconer who shared on a recent interview that I had with him, who I think quoted somebody else. If not, he was just sharing his own reflection that most of us are walking around in a continuous state of inner civil war, right? And at best, we manage that tension and just kind of feel that we get through the day. And at worst, we feel like we're going crazy and we feel like we don't know who we are anymore. And it feels like there are so many contradictions within us. And IFS just gives us a simple model that that's normal. It's normal that there are different parts of us that play different roles, that carry different purposes. They just need to be brought under the leadership of our core natural self, which all of us have. Believe it or not, I promise. It may even be the case that some parts of you don't want you to believe that because they feel that having a self might be dangerous, that if you allow yourself hope to believe in a self and get disappointed the way you have many other times in life, it'll be painful. Or to be your core self means that you get seen, and being seen means that you get rejected or neglected or something else. So there are natural reasons why certain parts of us don't want to believe in the idea of a core sense of self. But it's true and it's there, and I know it even if I've never met you. So that's just my little offering to you. And this podcast is a space for you to create space in order for that natural self within you to emerge. That when the parts within us get acknowledged and, what to speak of, appreciated for the role that they play, they naturally relax a little bit. And when that relaxation comes into place, our core self naturally emerges. And specifically, it's important for our core self to be present in our relationships. And often when there's conflict or tension in a relationship, it's because the parts of me are butting up against the parts of you that are trying to protect me and protect you, and vice versa. So in one of his books, Richard Schwartz authored You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, about intimacy in relationships and applying internal family systems to intimate relationships. And he talks about in chapter 1, isolation. And there's a paragraph here. It's a little bit of a lengthy paragraph. I'm going to read the whole thing because I think there's an important message that we need to keep in mind, that when we aren't aware of or ignore, we find ourselves falling into a very dangerous pit hole of relationships. So let me see if any of this sounds familiar. And much of this is about the Western idea of romance. There's a great book that my wife and I read at the beginning of our relationship called Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas, I think his name was. And I'm never quoting the right names of people. If you've been listening, I'm sorry about that. I'll check it out afterwards. But I believe it was Gary Thomas, or it might have been Gary Chapman, one of the two. But Sacred Marriage is the name of the book. Sacred Marriage. And it's the idea that relationships are meant to make us more holy than happy, and holy in the context of bringing us towards our authentic self rather than this sort of very recent idea in human history that relationships are built on romance. It's a feeling, baby. I love you and you love me and we're just going to make it work, and you bring the charge and I feel alive when I'm with you. And the problem is that as soon as I don't feel alive when I'm around you, I feel like there's something wrong with you, or maybe I picked the wrong person. And how many of us, the challenge of being in a long-term and committed relationship sometimes is this fear, oh my God, I chose the wrong person. I don't love them the way that I did. They're not the same person that I married. I'm not the same person that married them. And if it's all just based on this feeling of romance, it's very fragile. Now, that's not to say that sometimes relationships come to a natural end. Some relationships are perennials, that they go through seasons, and sometimes they may seem as if they've died, but they just are in a space of needing to be dormant and then will revive again. And some are annuals, meaning they bloom for a season and that's all they were meant for. And that's okay. And it takes maturity to be able to accept and recognize that sometimes relationships do come to their full completion and they don't fail. Some people say, my marriage failed or my relationship failed. No, it just reached its completion of what it was meant to be in my life and their life at this time. So all that to say, relationships have their different lengths and purposes, but if all our relationships are just simply based on the idea of a feeling in the moment, the founder of nonviolent communication mentions this really well when he talks about love, and we have a need for love. Well, how do you define love? If love is just a feeling, how can I say I love you all the time? Because feelings come and go and feelings change. So love has to be something more than just a feeling. Intimacy is more than just a feeling. And this idea of Western romance that we're supposed to feel all the time, the magic in a relationship, creates a lot of pressure. It creates a lot of pressure. That's not healthy or necessary. So I'm going to read this. He says, the message about romance, the romance, relief, and redemption to be found in intimate relationships may be required to convince us to enter the extraordinary institution that is American marriage. And this may exist outside of America, and I'm an American, so I can say that. But the American marriage is what we're talking about here, and the negative conceptions we have in our Western culture. As the cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead said, quote, and this is where this phrase American marriage comes from, the American marriage is one of the most difficult marriage forms that the human race has ever attempted. I'm going to say that again. The American marriage is one of the most difficult marriage forms that the human race has ever attempted. End quote. Couples, this is Richard Schwartz again writing, couples were once surrounded by communities of relatives and friends, by people who shared their values and helped them out. Today, couples are frequently isolated, mobile units that are expected to survive on their own. Not only is the couple isolated from its community, but each partner is often cut off from the other by the outrageous requirements of work or by the excessive demands of raising children, far from the help of kin networks. Indeed, children can be one of the bigger obstacles to intimacy that couples face. Virtually every study of marital satisfaction has shown that it drops precipitously with the birth of the first child and doesn't recover until the last one leaves. That sounds kind of grim, and I'm sure that's not true for everybody. And I think that what he's just trying to say here, as a father himself who has children, to Richard Schwartz, that ultimately there's a pressure that gets put on relationships. And this is where he's going. Let me just finish the paragraph here. He says, finally, partners are cut off from themselves, capital S, by being raised in a society that is so concerned with external appearances that authentic inner desires are ignored and feared. And this is the last sentence. Into this nearly impossible arrangement is poured the expectation that your partner should make you happy, and that if they don't, something is very wrong. I'm going to read that last sentence again. Into this nearly impossible arrangement is poured the expectation that your partner should make you happy, and that if they don't, something is very wrong. So, what I take away from that reading, that message, is that life, and specifically life in the context of relationships, comes with huge amount of pressures and expectations and roles and responsibilities for financial security and stability, for raising family and being present for your kids if you have kids, for the pressures that we face as individuals in a world that doesn't allow for safety and expression and vulnerability, and we often have to hide and protect ourselves. There can be a lot of isolation and pressure. And what happens, the way that we've built this concept of a Western relationship and romance, is that all of that gets resolved if you just find the right person. That all of that goes away and doesn't matter anymore because somebody loves you, or you love somebody, or you found that twin flame or sparkle in their eye. And while there is a truth towards companionship and towards support in relationship, we're never meant to dump all of that onto somebody else or have them dump that all onto us. It's an extraordinary responsibility that neither of us can fulfill. And as we've discussed, we have to assume the role and hold the role now and always as the primary caretaker of our own inner world, of our own inner parts. And so there's this deconstruction that needs to happen around the idea of modern relationships and their purpose and what they're meant to bring and what they're not capable of ever bringing. And if you're looking for a relationship, this is helpful to know because it decreases the pressure of the people you're trying to be in relationship in, and it also can help and assist with the narrative that you create around yourself when you think you haven't found the right person. Because I won't be happy and can't be happy and won't be able to experience X, Y, and Z unless I find so-and-so. Because I promise you, everyone that's found so-and-so is wondering if they found the right so-and-so and if they're having the right kind of relationship with so-and-so. And there's the inner relationship with self that gets lost in the whole equation. And if you have that, everything else with so-and-so is going to work itself out. Even if you don't find so-and-so and you find such and such, that primary relationship internally is the most important one. And any of the parts of you that don't agree with that have a problem with that are nervous about that are scared about that are angry about that are resistant to that lunge you into action in response to that, that's where your work is. That deserves a little bit of attention today. And if you're in a relationship, let this be an invitation to take some of the pressure off of your partner, to relieve them of the burden of expectation to do for you what only you can do for yourself. And that becomes the support structure in which partners can be there for each other, not to fulfill them in that journey, but so that they're aware that we are on our own inner journey. And we can stand up for ourselves and ask for the support that we need if and when we need it from our partner so that they can support us rather than doing the work for us. So I love you and I'm grateful that you're here spending this time with me. I love sharing these little messages with you so that I can hear them for myself. And more than anything, I want you to remember and keep in mind that you have a core sense of authentic self. You are a beautiful, shining light of divinity, that you are a spark of a divine fire, that you are part of a greater field of self-energy, of spirit that exists within and beyond everything. And you have access to that at every moment. But when the parts of ourselves that are afraid or that have been wounded take over and blend with us and we identify with them, we forget, or that self gets pushed out. And all we need to do is give a little bit of attention, create some space for curiosity, which is the first and foremost doorway into self, to understand the parts in ourselves that are overactive right now, and create some space for compassion to follow that curiosity, and create space for ourselves to emerge so that we can take the pressure off of our relationships, and put some focus back on ourselves and the parts that need attention. I love you. I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope that today you find a doorway to live more from a place of self.